everyone please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to your host, Josh Donlan.
Woo! Good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? I am Josh Donlan. I'm the program director here at Full Sail University for the mobile development program. And today's panel is on working with large web and mobile development teams. Joining me on stage, we have Austin and Margaret from Highwinds and Capital One. So give them a hand of applause for joining us. Thanks. And also welcome everybody here on campus and those joining us online. So thanks for tuning in. And we'll have a talk here about what it's like to develop in teams, which is always a huge kind of element of what we do here at the campus and what's needed out there in the industry. We'll have some QA here at the end. So let's just get started. Tell us a little bit about the teams that you work on. What are the size teams that you work on, and what are maybe the different aspects or positions within those teams for both of you?
Oh, sorry. So the team that I work on, the web development team, is probably like 7. Keeps making weird noises.
Sure, hoops.
Shit. There we go. So the team that I work on, the web team, is probably like 8 people, maybe six to 8 people. iOS is probably like 5 people. Android is probably like 6 or 8 people right now. And when we have like an extra effort for something like large work, we pull in kind of people from other teams that don't have a lot of work. So then we like get their resources for a little while, and then they go back to doing like what they were working on before.
And then what about the design side of that? Because does that include designers, or is that specific developers?
That's just the development team. The team I work on is just 2 designers, and then we have our manager too.
Okay, awesome.
So currently I have 5 between Mac OS X and iOS, 3 for Android, 3 on Windows, and I have a UI person and a UX person, which we can have that discussion about where those roles lie. And then also have QA and all that fun stuff. And then this morning I announced I'm hiring 17 more people, so now I'm going to have web and more of all of those things.
17. We got a couple. So that's awesome. So it sounds like both of you are working with teams of about 20-ish between the different technologies there. Just developers, right? And how many products would you say that those developers serve?
It's a little different for me because we have, so with Highwinds, we have one customer-facing product, and then we have in-house brands that are direct-to-consumer. So we spend a whole lot of time marketing those and building these platforms within our network that we already have. And so we go direct-to-consumer and we say, hey, you know, like, we have this product, it's a great value. So we actually end up being, we have 5 different major brands that we work on that are underneath the Highwinds umbrella. So I mean, it's not just one project, it's quite a few. They're targeted at multiple different verticals.
Sure. And Margaret, I know you've been talking around campus quite a bit over the last couple of days. So you've been showing off some credit score type applications and also some things that you're doing in-house with Capital One. What are the main products that you have there that are kind of in your area?
In my area, that's all I work on.
Just those 2?
I just work on the app about credit scores. So we, instead of like working on a bunch of different things, I like have sole focus on one like entire experience across the 3 platforms.
Okay, that's awesome. So one of the things I think I'm always dealing with when I have students that are trying to figure out how to transition from being a student into the industry is just that. How do you fit into a team? Right? A lot of times students, especially those online, if we have people watching online, they're isolated in a lot of their projects and what they're handing in for assignments because they're being assessed individually and everything like that. So what do you find, in terms of onboarding new talent? What is it like for somebody kind of fresh out of college to go into that world of development and design and trying to fit in with everybody?
For me, I would say it's probably hop in, ask questions. It's fresh out of school. You know the fundamentals and the foundations of what you're supposed to be doing, but there's so much more that goes along with it. Whether it's product management, which sometimes people are familiar with, sometimes you're not. Then you have project management, which is totally different. And so there's a whole lot of moving parts and pieces that go into the planning stages of a product all the way to shipping. And that includes the code that you write or the interfaces that you design. And so a lot of times you have to ask, even if it's a simple question, because why are we doing it this way? Whether that's why is an interface like that? Why did we design it like that? What did we find in user testing that showed this was the best way to do it? All the way to why is this code architected like this? And when you ask those questions, what you alleviate is the thing where you feel like you have this pressure where you have to come in and immediately contribute. And everybody wants you to. That's the goal. But what me as a lead, what I don't want you doing is taking a week working on something and being like, no. What we really wanted you to do is this, and it could have been solved with a simple question. So that's the first thing. And then from there, it's about being comfortable and knowing your limits and knowing where you are in your stack. And so knowing what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with, because at that point you can start asking the right questions more often than not, and really kind of grow, because that's the goal as a junior is to grow you into something that, at the end of the day, 5 years down the road, you're a highly capable senior that knows the stack inside and out. So.
I guess I can add to that a little bit. So I'm familiar with moving for a job. So I moved to a new city, which is around the Washington D.C. area, and it was terrifying. I didn't know anyone. I kind of knew someone. So it takes a while. I'm not going to say it's easy. It takes a little bit. I started signing up and going to a ton of meetups. I do a lot of I was doing a lot of external things to kind of broaden my market and meet a lot of people. And then over time I was got to know the people I worked with, and like he was saying, asking questions, being comfortable in asking questions and being okay to fail. I feel confidence is really good, but you'll get that over time. Yeah, I think that's about it.
So I heard kind of a resounding theme there, and that's, knowing your limits, number one, and then number two, when you run into a wall or some kind of hurdle, to be comfortable asking questions and reach out to the team. So I think what that leads itself to is the question of, where do you expect people to be coming in to a team? Do you expect somebody to kind of just be sitting there and you ask them to do something and then they just go? Do you expect somebody to need a little bit more familiarity on the job? Where does that come in?
I would say it's when it comes down to it, when you're a junior, you're always going to have questions. It's never, that's what you're there to do, is ask questions and learn. We know that's what we're expecting. So when you come in, you start asking questions, and you start we'll give you a task, and we know it's going to take longer than average. If it's something that we handed to someone who's been in the industry for 4 or 5 years, they might be able to knock it out in 2 or 3 days, where a junior might be able to knock it out in 5 to 7 days. But we give you those tasks based on what your boundaries are and where we feel that you're comfortable. Because as a junior, you quite often don't get to pick your task. A lot of times it'll be something that's given to you either as a test to see, okay, are they really capable, or are they at the point where they can handle something of either this scope or this scale? Or is it something where we're handing it to you because we know that you can do it and you've already done this, and we know that you're going to be faster this time and you've already been familiar with that code? So it goes down both boundaries of trying to make you grow and learning your limits and keeping you asking questions, and then making sure that you haven't lost what you've already learned.
Yeah, the team I work on, I don't work independently a lot. When I do a lot, produce actual visual work, that's pretty much probably the only time that I'm doing something kind of on my own. But if you came into our team, for instance, we have this designer development program that we do. So we interview a bunch of candidates, and you either get a position to be full-time for 2 years with like 1 year experience doing one thing, and then you can kind of pick another track for another year and learn something like different in the company. But then we also like hire interns as well. So when you come into that, but like the entire process from beginning of research of design to like moving forward through everything and like iterations and coming up with ideas and testing and like everything, it's literally all collaborative. We invite you to like be inside of everything, which I think is like a really, really special place to be.
Sure. So when you bring somebody on, I'm just curious, actually, kind of selfishly, how often do you have somebody that you bring on that is just good to go? Because I have a lot of times, where I'm coming from with that is I have a lot of students sometimes, especially nearing grad, where, and I see this a lot with developers, they just I don't know how to do that. Yeah, you do. Just sit down and do it. How often do you think that that's the case? How often do you get people that come in that, they have those confidence issues, and then you task them with something and you're surprised at what you find out? And then the flip of that is also true. Do you find that you bring in people that maybe they interview really well, but they don't know as much as they think they know? Like
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
That comes down on being a good interviewer. No, it's interesting because I hired a Full Sail grad last year, fresh out of school, and he came in and he did great work, but he just wanted to make sure that it was to the dot of what we were expecting, right? So he asked a lot of questions in that realm, where about the same time I hired one of the more well-known Android developers in Orlando, and he came in, and they both had about the same spin-up rate. They're working on different problems, but they had the same spin-up rate and the same different questions. Very rarely, unless it's something that is a very public project that's like open source, for example, where somebody can study code ahead of time, do you have a developer that can come in and just immediately contribute. I think on the UI, UX side, it's a little bit different if the company is set up well. Because if you come in and you have all of this user testing data, both quantitative and qualitative, and you have somebody who understands how to look at data like that, they're going to need to get spun up on personas and that kind of thing. But for the most part, I say there's probably a little intuition there where they can come in and say, this UI flow just isn't, and they're immediately more off the ground than you usually find with the developer.
Sure. You agree on the design side?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Sounds good. I endorse this statement.
All right. We'll start going this way then. I'll give you a chance to answer first. So let's move on a little bit from the onboarding side. So, okay, you have somebody in there, and they're in the team working, asking questions and everything like we just talked about. What would a day in the life of a employee there as part of that team? Because you said very rarely do you work solo, right? So you're usually as part of that team. So what does that process look like from, task is given to you to starting to work on it to, the end? I'll start with you.
Trying to think of an example, but I can't talk about that one. So basically, the problem will come down from so now that we've launched, and we've been launched for like a little over a year, so we're getting tons of data back, like from the Internet of Things, from the App Store kind of things, from people that things people are demanding or asking of us. So from there's like this team of people on the product side, and they're into that stuff all the time. And so like, when they start to notice that a lot of people are having the same problem, then that becomes like a bigger issue than the rest. And then kind of that moves like, down the chain and then moves along to us. And actually, they did a pretty good job, their team, of kind of mapping out the entire year of things we want to get done. So there's stuff we want to get done, but we won't get to it till near the end of the year. That's just like how this whole process works. So when it comes to us, then we kind of all get together and we start brainstorming and figuring out like different ideas or approaches, or, when you think even things that are like feature driven or stuff that comes in as like a new feature in this experience, you can't like just treat it as, let's make a feature and put it in there. It has to be like cohesive over the whole experience. So we're like, okay, this thing might affect this section, but it's also affecting this section. And it also is affecting this other section that lives like a little bit deeper in there. So we kind of like all together are trying to figure out where's the best place for that to go. And, you know, in the beginning, we're making educated assumptions about that. So after that, we move into like wireframing and then the visual stuff, and then we do a prototype, and we have a cadence of user testing like every 2 weeks. So we're always ramping up, making stuff for that, and then we'll go into the lab for the day and, you know, watch a lot of watch stuff fail, watch it exceed, watch designs fail, ideas succeed, that kind of thing. And then after that, I mean, it's just then we get to release at some point, but sometimes it's like going back to, you know, the beginning and figuring it out, or sometimes it's just like a minimal change, and then we're able to hand that off and then double work on it, and then it becomes in the next release.
So you start by taking the requirement, coming up with a design, wireframing out, prototyping the design, watching the design in a test, and then refining that before it even goes to the dev, right? Mm-hmm. So then once it gets to the dev side, how do you guys handle that?
So a lot of times on the dev side, it comes in and sometimes it's like, oh, this is great, or maybe they'll have feedback, or, you know, we're very collaborative in that sense too, that we have a final stage after we've tested everything where we bring the lead for the platform in. And so we'll go, okay, this is our test. This is what we know. This is what our users saw. This is what they thought. And then they'll go, well, what if you change this from a modal to a dialogue, or, you know, something like that. And then there will be this data model doesn't work like that. We're not passing the data this way. So we need to, you know, go in and we're going to have to change all this stuff. And so then it becomes, okay, at that point, you start getting the real scope of the task of, okay, let's start actually estimating this and figuring out what teams need to go where. Because, for example, like at Highwinds, on some of the products that we work on, for me to do a new feature and get all the way from user testing and just the app component, I have people who have to write APIs, and then I have to have people who write server software, and then people who write the software that runs on the software for the servers that the other person built.
Right.
So you end up getting this huge scope, and then that's when you have to come in and really kind of plan it all out and get it in this little magic sequence where you don't have anybody blocking anybody else across 5 or 6 teams.
Oh, sorry. I do a lot of like, can we do this? Can we do this? Is like a thing, you know? And then they'll be like, no, you're nuts, you know, or like, yeah, let's do it. And then there's like a lot of recommendations that come from like a developer side, like, hey, like I wouldn't recommend doing it this way because there's like said problem with it. And it's awesome because I'm like, oh, I trust you. This is amazing. Yeah, let's figure it out together. That was a really important thing that I forgot to say. They are involved, like with us, you know.
No, and that's great because it sounds like you both have individual teams that you work on, but then there's also this challenge where once you have your product, it's not just your say. You don't get the final call on it. So it's got, not only does it go to something like QA, but there are other systems in play. So you have the server team, the backend team, API team, possibly a hardware team, depending on what product you're working on. Yep. And then obviously that's going back and forth with the design team, making sure that you're not completely ruining what you guys came up with, right? Because at the end of the day, there's like, you know, a brand package that needs to come out and has to be on point. So what kind of systems are in place that help you facilitate that communication? Because that's often the biggest problem with large teams is communication, right? Getting back and forth. So I'm curious, like, are there tools or systems that you guys use in your respective day-to-day?
Slack. We did use HipChat, and I loved HipChat. And then we used Slack, and now it's okay.
Really?
Yeah. HipChat was super simple, and I think that's why I liked it. And then my desktop client never works for Slack, so I think that's probably why I hate it. So it's that, and then like to communicate. Do you guys use Zeppelin at all?
Nope.
For design? So it hands off like all the specs and stuff. You know, it specs like padding, spacing, button size, all those things, and like asset delivery. It does that. Like you can, developers on the other side can download that. Because now, so our design team, so I work on this one project, but it's within like a card design department. So within that, we're still in this one building, and the rest of our product team and our development team just moved to a building like to the corporate office across the street. So now we're completely we can't just run down to the 8th floor anymore, kind of thing.
Sure.
So that's put a little bit of a challenge between us, but yeah, that whole like communication thing. I mean, we're texting, we're talking, we're like on Slack, we're emailing. If they can't find me, we're always like running into each other.
I like doing these because you always find out other teams' tools, and you're like, oh, that sounds awesome. So I live in a product called AHA. It's a product management tool. So I'm sure if you don't know what Jira is, at some point you will definitely learn Jira and all of its glories. But with AHA, so we have an ideas portal where our customers can come in and put ideas, and it's all branded and nice and looks great. But also the execs will go in and they'll throw in ideas, marketing, developers, whatever, and then you start this conversation. And then the product team looks at it and they're like, what can we do with this? And so you start and you go, okay, this has a feature weight of this. And then we go in and we look and we say, okay, compared to our competitors, who can implement this before we could? And we do a big analysis like that. And so from there, it starts a chain because once I go from AHA, it starts going to everybody else's system. So the designers have their own little systems that they use, and the devs have Jiras all set up differently. So I just have a button I hit, and I'm like, go to the iOS team, and it goes in their flow. And then by the time it's all said and done, it comes back up to back up to AHA, and then everything's there, and so everybody can read it at any point in time. Really handy things are like, it has a live roadmap in it that the execs don't have to get into everything. They just get into the big overall picture that has like the highlights. So they can click a button at any point in time and go, this is where we're going. It's like, perfect.
So you try to have that separation of
Yeah.
That all comes through you, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That
So,
sucks.
yeah.
That's an interesting kind of position. So working in that team then, with all those kind of things, what is your involvement when it comes to prioritization and everything like that? I know you said that there's some metrics that you use, like, okay, we can beat a competitor market, for example, is one of those metrics.
So for us, we're really fortunate at Highwinds that we have basically five or so analytics teams. So we have our UX team, which is focused on interaction and what people are saying. The support team, which is labeling good feedback whenever they close a support ticket and somebody's like, hey, by the way, I really wish you'd add this feature. So they tag it feedback and it gets escalated up one way. And then we have our internal stuff where, as a business decision, for example, we were looking at server bandwidth and CPU the other day. And the CEO is like, okay, what I want you to do is take this scatter plot and move it lower to the left. And it's like, okay. So now we have to figure out, our users don't know anything about that, but that's just a business goal. And so we have to come in and we have a weighted value that we look at everything. User value has a certain number. Server value has a certain number. Bandwidth has a certain number. And based on that impact, it comes up with an idea score, which gives us a rough figure of what the priority should be. And then obviously there's things that can supersede it. Like if there's something that happens in the competitive market where we need to go, okay, we need to fast follow this, where somebody else already took the risk on the innovation, it went well, but we have to pivot and come back on this. So there's a bunch of different levels, but I really like the user and the business metrics of what all does this affect, and on a scale of 1 to 3, within those, what is the level there? Because it makes it pretty easy to, with data, quantify what you should do.
And then what's interesting, I think, from both of you said some of your team moved to a different building. You're working with all these teams. I'm assuming they're not all in the same building.
No, everywhere from Belarus to Amsterdam to Orlando to New York to Chicago, Phoenix.
Yeah, we built. I launched Android with a team in in San Francisco, so which is insane. Like they're always like 3 hours, behind me. So that was interesting.
So how does, I mean, that's another interesting topic. So you have these tools, and some of them are asynchronous in nature, and some of them are synchronous in nature. Some of them are a quasi-hybrid of that, like Slack, where you have some people that are talking back and forth, and other people that are going back, and you have 312 missed messages. Ask me how I know. So in that light, like, I work with some West Coast people too, so I'm curious to see it's different culture, East Coast and West Coast, and how that works, and then the time zone is another layer on top of that. So what are some of the challenges you face, just working with integrating teams in different cultures, and that's just East Coast to West Coast. You said even overseas,
Yeah.
Just messing.
These hoops.
So for us, it's interesting when you have the majority of a team somewhere. So you have two different really answers to this question. When you have, for example, my app dev team, my core guys that do the clients, I only have one person remote right now. So when something happens or we have a meeting or something like that, and he's in Russia, so he's 8 hours difference. So when we have a meeting or there's a decision or something, you have to kind of balance the feelings there, because it's like, oh, I was left out. I didn't get to have, my input on this, or why are we doing this, or something like that. And then you also have people in 4 different places, and you kind of have to manage your flow, because what you don't want to happen is like a game of overriding telephone, because then what happens is all of a sudden this feature gets dropped, or this requirement of this feature gets dropped, which is even worse, because then you end up with 2 products and you're about to launch, and the QA guy's going, well, on Android it does this, but on iOS it does this. What happened? And it's like, uh-oh.
And would you say that falls on the design team at some point, like, or is it something that gets changed after it's handed off, or because that's a good question. I mean, it sounds like you hand over kind of wireframes, and obviously you're in clear communication with your devs. So bravo on that, by the way. I know it's not always the case, depending on where you work, that the designers and devs are working that closely. When you hand off a design, do you take into consideration things like, okay, for an iOS the behavior is going to be like this, and on Android the behavior is going to be like this, but on web it's going to look like this? And how does that work on your end? I mean, it's a heavy question.
No, it's okay. It's interesting that you asked that, because I feel as if like I've been doing it for a while and it's just become like second nature to me now. So like we're definitely considering all experiences, and sometimes when so now when we're kind of, as a designer, like we'll be kind of the one in charge of that thing that we're working on. So then we're in charge of translating it, or like to iOS, and then translating it to responsive web. We take care of kind of everything, which is like exhausting sometimes, but pretty cool. I don't know. Did I answer?
Yeah, I think that answers that. So you definitely do hand off 3 different kind of requirements based off the actually deliver them.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, because each platform, each user, specific to that platform is going to be a little bit different. We follow material design pretty closely. Like iOS is a little bit different. Even stuff like icons. They're different. So they're gonna look a little bit differently and act essentially a little bit differently. But essentially, we get them the experiences as close as possible across.
Yeah, you want the same task to always be able to be accomplished. It might not always end up being you tap here, you tap here, you tap here, and it's the same space on the screen. Or the animation might be different, or the dialogue's different, or something like that. But generally, you should be able to get from point A to point B in like the same kind of flow, ideally.
In your teams, then, are the designers expected to be fluent in all of those different delivery mechanisms? Does that fall on the designer, or is it more of a kind of in a back and forth, something you pick up over time? I'm assuming that's maybe not initially, but something you said comes second nature to you. So
yeah.
I'm assuming you didn't. We talked a little bit earlier, and when you graduated, a lot of this stuff wasn't even part of the design realm, and you kind of grown into it throughout your career.
Yeah.
You just find you pick up this stuff over time?
Yeah, like learning stuff and then vibing off of other people, or I'm like, I have someone who's better at it. I go, like, is this okay? Am I messing this up? Even when I'm working with my partner, he doesn't know material design, like I do. So he'll be like, how is this supposed to look in Android? And I'm like, oh, you just do this thing, and then he's able to do it. So it's a lot of Google. It's a lot of like asking someone who knows more stuff than you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's whenever people come in, I expect them to at least know. So you have human interface guidelines for iOS and material design for Apple, or for Android. I prefer, yeah, it's great for them to know that, because there is that second nature that saves you so much time once you get used to it. Because then you aren't sitting there going, well, it's a dialogue over here, but is this going to be a full screen dialogue on Android? Is this behavior supposed to take me to another screen because that changes? And so like there's a whole lot of stuff to learn like that. Doesn't mean you can't learn it. I actually, one of my more recent UI hires, she's a fine arts degree illustrator by trade. She's got a big Cintiq tablet like you guys have in your great lab over here. And she wasn't very familiar with material design. But I needed somebody who could really come up with some great assets for this project. And it was like, we'll teach you everything you need to know about material. You just learn the iconography, and then we'll kind of go from there. And 2 years later, she's great at it. So
I think that kind of brings us back to almost full circle, kind of back to the beginning. When you are building these teams, do you hire the person more than the skill set?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. You wanna?
Sure. I think it's both.
Yeah.
It's both what you can do, and I almost said something very bold, but I didn't.
We can be bold. It's only streaming to the world. It's fine.
Yeah, right. Totally. I don't want to get myself in trouble. It's both like, like, is this a wonderful person? I mean, so if I'm being realistic here, is that like the people you work with, you spend the most time with the people you work with. So it's important that that person, you enjoy being around that person, because if you don't, it's going to be hell. So luckily for me, I like work with some of the greatest people, and they're all like my best friends, now, which is, I feel really thankful for that.
Yeah, I went to lunch with 17 people today.
Yeah,
that's
impressive.
Like your entire team there, it's like, okay, what are we doing for lunch today? It's interesting because that kind of goes two ways for me with UI UX, which is there's people that are UI people and there's people that are UX people. And you probably could talk about this for like 6 hours about how titles don't make sense in UI UX anymore, and this kind of stuff. But what I try to find are people who, like, for example, I'm hiring 2 right now. And so what I'm looking for is somebody who really likes the UI side, but knows what UX is, like the fundamental research aspect of it. But then at the same time, I want somebody who's really UX heavy, but knows UI too, and kind of like pair those together. When it comes to devs, it depends on the level that you're hiring. For a senior, I generally care more about how accepting they are of other people's ideas and critiques and that kind of thing, because a senior dev coming in can really be a toxic thing if you don't have the right person. It can blow your entire development leadership up. A junior, on the other hand, I care more about being comfortable with them and knowing that they have a passion to learn. You said it earlier. I said it recently, Digital Orlando, when we were here earlier this year or last year. The biggest thing you can do as a junior dev is go out to meetups. Talk to everybody, go shake everybody's hands, get to know people. Because when junior positions come open, there's 300 resumes that are going to be in your inbox by 5 p.m., guaranteed. And you're going to be more comfortable with the guy that you know is going to meetups, who's asking the right questions, who's getting in the faces of people that really, really know CSS or Angular or React or whatever it's going to be that they want to do, because you already know that person's willing to learn. You know they're going to ask questions, and you already have a repertoire with them for being comfortable. So for juniors, it's very much about your outside personality, because as a developer, the technology stack that you're learning today isn't going to be the one you're using in 20 years, most likely. Mm-hmm. I mean, for 95%, you're going to school to be a developer, not to be a Android guy.
I need to make sure that that's recorded.
Sure.
I tell people, because people don't listen to me, but they'll listen to that. No, that's awesome advice. Now, the question came up at a panel earlier. I kind of want to reiterate it here because I think it was actually a really good question for a panel like this. And then I think at that point we'll probably be getting close to opening up for you guys to ask. But culture, right? So that came up in both of those answers there. Culture, like I guess there's two parts of the question. The first question is, how have you seen the culture in your fields change over the last, I don't know, let's say 10 years? And then I guess the follow-up to that is, where do you see it going? Like what is the trajectory, and how are you seeing kind of this industry change?
So for me, I have worked for kind of a little bit of everything. I've worked for the 2-person startup that's bootstrapped by 1 person. I've worked for the startup that has very good Series A funding and closed down in a very spectacular fashion. And I've worked for a company that is extremely large, stable, and very business-oriented, post-revenue, extremely detailed model. It's kind of becoming interesting, and I think it's a trend as people our age get older, that it used to always be about the snacks, the foods, the perks, and that kind of stuff. And I think as we get older now, it's becoming more like, for me anyways, it's like, do they have 4% 401k matching or 6%? And what time do I have to be at work? That kind of thing. Like my team, for example, I allow them to come in anywhere between 8 and 10, and they leave anywhere between 5 and 7. But one of the startups I worked for, they didn't care as long as you put in 8 hours a day. And so we'd be there at night in shorts, flip-flops, and T-shirts at 9 o'clock at night. But as you get older, you start to realize that you don't want to do those things anymore. So I'm not sure if it's companies and cultures changing, because it kind of seems like it is, but I think it's also the people our age group that really started, the mobile dev trend and that kind of stuff, that got in it on the ground, that as we're getting older, it's all starting to shift with us a little bit. I don't know.
Same. I would echo that. And talking about, so there's an article that came out, I think, recently, and it was like basically like Google got it wrong when we're talking about open workspace. Like, I work in an open workspace. It is super distracting. Like, it's awesome. Don't get me wrong. Like, we don't have cubicles. It's like, it feels liberating. Like, we have beanbags, and I love that stuff. But as far as like when you're talking about productivity, and they talk about, there's like a statistic of like 20 to 30 minutes or something it can take for you to get back into like what you were doing if you were in a zone and somebody comes and interrupts you. But like, that's the thing. There's nothing around you. So people are interrupting you all the time. And let's talk about this thing. And I mean, I'm guilty of it. I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
and that's just sometimes, your day goes by. There are, like different things become important. I will imagine like at some point we're going to be like, okay, maybe we do need to be a little bit separate, or, we'll get rid of having like dedicated desks, and we'll just have like little places, we can go and you can focus, and like,
it's interesting. I was asked this week, it was like, so we're gonna open up this floor plan and you can do whatever you want to do. Like, come up with the best open floor plan that you want. And I was like, I don't know if I really want that anymore. I kind of like, maybe we can have some quiet spaces over here and some loud spaces over here. Because the only thing it takes is one person to destroy any productivity for the afternoon.
Oh, I call it the witching hour.
Yeah.
It happens at 3.
Yeah. The first person.
You feel it rise.
The Nerf gun, the first person who fires it, it's over.
Right.
Yeah, one day I was like super focused, and I was working at USA Today, and man, I was so into what I was doing. I was like, yes, this is amazing. I'm feeling great, And they were having the Nerf battle, like they did every day. And this time, one hit my monitor and then hit me in the face, and I was like, ah! And I just started screaming, and everyone's like, I'm like, just stop doing it, Which I'm a proprietor of fun. I love having fun, We fly like these shark balloons, this remote control thing. Like, I love that, but sometimes it's just like, super annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were our building over there. If anybody's ever been to 4D, it's this big open glass building. It's funny you mentioned that. We got word in mobile that game dev was coming for us, so we were all waiting on the balcony with our Nerf guns, and they came in and we fired down. We had the strategic advantage, and right then the executives started pouring out of the conference room, and we were like, "Oh crap, we have to pick up 400 Nerf guns."
Awesome.
But yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I can even see that from an education side. We have a whole bunch of teachers, and yeah, they're programmers as well. But you get a lull, or you're working on curriculum, and then somebody goes, "Oh, hey, did you see the Game of Thrones last night?" Oops, there goes an hour of my day. You gotta find that. So I think that naturally lends itself to the question of remote work. I get this question a lot, and being that we teach online students, some of which may be watching right now, a lot of times online, it's hard to communicate like what the expectations are, right? So people don't realize that they're being distracted, or they I have a lot of conversations with students where it's, "Oh, I worked 4 hours on this today." It's like, "Well, can you explain to me the environment in which you were working on that?" It's like, "Oh, I was on my couch, my dog was on my lap, I was watching TV, and I had my laptop open." It's like, it's not exactly 4 hours. Are you guys seeing that with remote work? Do you guys allow remote work at all, or is everything on camp? How do you track that? Or you just kind of, is it true salary? Like, how does that fit in?
Yeah, we have true salary. I get more work done at home than I do at work. It's weird. So if I have to really focus, I will usually just like spend a day at home. But to be honest, that was a really good point. Like, what gets lost in translation, I think, from working from home, which, I think it's anyone who can do it and handle it. But we were talking about this the other day, that there are just some things that require people to be in person to work through. So it's essentially why, I don't think I could move, what if I was like, I want to move to San Francisco, and I moved there, I don't think I could stay on my team, because I think I would become just lost in the whole game.
Yeah, so it's funny because, I let my team work from home 1 day a week. Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. I don't let Monday or Friday, with the rare exception. I think it's good because it gives you a change of pace. It can give you a break. It can reset your environment, kind of thing. But one of my best friends, who is now coming with me to my 5th company, that we've worked together, his last job was all remote, and it drove him insane. Like, he was literally, it was, I don't have anybody to go to lunch with. I don't feel pressured to work at all. And he was the more senior person on the team, so he was constantly waiting on other people. So he could work for 4 hours a day and get more done than they could in 8. And so he just kind of didn't have that pressure. And so you run into those situations where you have to be super disciplined, and there's this mental barrier that you have to build, otherwise you'll work all the time. In my experience of, for me, I have an office that I shut doors to. That's totally separate from any. There's no TV in there. It's my office. And when I work from home, I work from there. And when I'm not in that room, I don't work. And I think that's something that some people, like you were talking about with the couch and the dog and that kind of thing, you either end up not being productive, or because you weren't so productive, you end up trying to do that all day for 10 hours. And then all of a sudden it's time for dinner, and you're I still didn't get this done. And it was because you just never got in the groove.
So do you think that there's a parallel between some of those things that we just talked about? Like you say, you got more done at home, but then you also said that at the office it can get crazy, and you have distractions and everything like that. So do you think that that's related? Do you think that maybe the culture at work might lend itself to the remote work actually becoming more or possibly even less productive, depending on what the balance is? Or do you think that it depends more on the individual, regardless of the environment?
Yeah, I think the individual. Some people say they can't work from home because they have kids, but I'm I'm a single girl who just has a cat, So that's it's very quiet. It's what I make it. When the office is, I guess, my family kind of thing. So it's a little bit distracting. Not that I don't get work done. I get a ton of work done all the time. It's just a little bit different.
Sure.
Yeah, for me, it depends on what I'm doing. If I'm focusing on big long-term product planning and it's really detailed and that kind of thing, I don't want anyone anywhere close to me. And and like we have cubes, but they're big cubes, but there's enough of us in a row that we can slide our chairs over 2 feet and end up talking about Game of Thrones for 3 hours. Where when I'm at home, I can lock myself up and I can do whatever. But it's also nice because when you work from home and remote and stuff, like today, for example, I just went and took my laptop and sat outside and did paperwork for 2.5 hours at lunch today. Like you get some of those change of scenery kind of things, which are really nice when you're not working on something that's high pressured. But when it really comes down to it, every person needs a high pressure environment, whether that's you making yourself be disciplined enough at home to work and get that much done, however you do it, or you have to be able to do it at the office. It's one of the two. I don't work well full-time remote. I don't enjoy it.
I think when I have a lot to do.
Yeah.
A lot to do, and there has to be focus, and there's like a really important deadline that's coming. That's when I do it the most.
Yeah, I'm the same way actually, because I have a glass door with no ceiling. So when I need work done, I work from home and get it done. Yeah. When your kid gets to elementary school, that is the best. 5 or 6 hours, just undistracted work. Okay, so I think we're getting real close. I did want to leave plenty of time for question and answers because I know we ran short on the last panel that we did. There were still people that wanted to ask questions. So I think we're going to open that up. We do have a runner with a mic, so if you have a question, we have a couple runners with a mic. Let's go ahead and raise a hand. We got one over here, one back there, two over here. So we got at least 4 hands up right now.
Sweet.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yep. And so we have the development side and we have the design side. I'm currently switching into cloud tech, so I was kind of wondering how much either one of you guys actually works with the cloud tech teams, because I know everything that you guys do require.
What are you calling cloud tech?
Like running servers, maintenance, stuff like that.
Obviously.
That's all you.
Yeah, sorry.
They also, before you answer this, they also in cloud tech they'll do things like deployment systems and containerization and those kind of things. So
cool. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Highwinds, but we're actually a CDN. We're a content delivery network. So that means we own fiber and servers and everything all around the world. As a matter of fact, if you use Steam, you've used our network. We distribute most of their games. So for us, I mean, our entire infrastructure is all cloud. That's what I was talking about earlier when I alluded to the server team, which are the team that like actually deploys the images and all that stuff, and we actually have teams that write the images too. It's a very interesting. Cloud tech is something that's becoming more and more prevalent. There's actually, I can't remember the name of it, they're out of Boston. They're hiring something like 115 AWS engineers right now. And people who basically, the only thing they do is they go into companies and they say, okay, you have this legacy system that you built, but we're going to take this all and we're going to move it to AWS and give you edges all around the world, and all of the automation that goes with it. So yeah, I mean, it's not a bad field to start out in because, and on top of it, a lot of people are just doing the AWS program or the Azure program or whichever one. So for you guys to already have a degree in something where you guys are like learning that kind of thing, it's pretty, you kind of got your foot up there.
I'm pretty sure you actually have a class in doing exactly what he just said, like taking a legacy system and moving it into a cloud-based system. So cool. That's pretty cool. So
thank you.
Hi, my name is Rashan. I'm a mobile dev student, and I've been working in group projects my whole entire career at Full Sail, and oftentimes there'd be at least one student who were, I'd say, uncomfortable with the task at hand or just wouldn't pick up their own slack. And I guess my question is, does that happen in the workforce after school? Do people just not pick up their own slack?
So to paraphrase, did I get this right, Rashan, is how does industry handle people carrying their weight essentially on a team? Like, I think it's a little bit different from students to enterprise, obviously, but.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I've had to redo work that's been done, kind of thing. I had to pick up that. So how do we handle it? They're not on our team anymore. But that's not because, So I feel bad in saying that because it wasn't, I think, what I'm trying to say is that he was kind of new to the game, kind of thing. So his like mind wasn't there yet. So it was kind of like me going back and like being like, okay, so this is what we did, and like I have to fix it for you, kind of thing. But like I don't work with anyone directly that like can't do their job or doesn't do their job. To be honest, where I work, I'm pretty sure we're super picky and hiring people that are self-motivated and like get shit done because like the stuff that we work in is so demanding that there's no time for that kind of thing.
My coffee mug literally says that.
Get shit done.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. We had a deadline for like January 8th or something. And this guy kept saying that he's really far along, everything works, like all this stuff. Well, I mean, my background is mobile dev, so I know how to launch Xcode and look at GitHub, just like anybody else. And so I go in and I start playing with it. I'm like, this isn't good. And the other guys are already way done. So the team just basically picks up the slack, starts a new release branch, and just builds the entire thing. And this dude kept still saying that he was doing it, whatever. So needless to say, we got the product out on time. A bunch of guys sacrificed a lot of time over a break to get it done, picked up the slack, made the release, made all of the marketing promos. And because see, that's the thing, like when you start getting into these companies, you're not just delaying the release date of this app. You're also delaying a $2 million marketing effort, social promos, coupons, all this stuff, API deployments, like all this stuff, it's your fault. So yeah, he doesn't work on my team anymore. I mean, it's real world. It's, you pull your weight, and generally speaking, because I've never like left a dev on a bad term, I always try to get everybody to use anything like, he's only the second person I've ever fired. I went back talking. He's like, you know what? He's like, yeah, I learned my lesson. I screwed up the entire team. Like I did all this stuff. He's doing fine now. So don't use it as a learning experience because it can be really uncomfortable.
Yeah. I used to give an analogy with grades. Because I get a lot of students that just aren't aware of what a C is, right? And so a C is the person that does their job to expectation, and a B is somebody that goes a little bit above and beyond, and an A is somebody that's just mastered it. A D is somebody that's about ready to get a demotion, and an F is somebody who's about ready to get fired, right? So to map education to teamwork, right? If somebody is like the first time, like you said, if there's somebody's like the first time and they're not showing their thing in a team, generally that's a coachable moment, a teachable moment. You can say, hey, look, this is what you're holding back. You keep doing it though, you get too many D's. That's what happens. So you have to look at it that way. You have to look at it holistically, and part of the learning experience is learning about that kind of thing. And then when you have teamwork in school, it's to prepare you for that, so you're not doing it out in the real world. But at the end of the day, you're still students, so everybody's learning, and that's I can assure you from an educator standpoint, one of the most challenging things to administer is team projects, like by far. And I'm sure it's not that much different out in the real world. Like the hardest thing to do is fairly evaluate a team as a whole while holding an individual accountable.
Especially when it's like 80 people.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a web student. I graduate next month. So as a designer and as a developer, what's something you wish the other team like did better as far as like communication?
I know. Like, whoa.
There's a whole lot of personality plays there. I will tell you from a dev standpoint, a lot of times they're And like now that I'm more on the product side, I get the whole picture from that angle. But this is the number one way I've seen arguments start. Number one, dev goes, this is a bad idea. I don't understand why we're doing this. And the person goes, and the UX person goes, well, do you have any data to back that up? And they're like, that's not my job to have that data to back that up. And then you end up in this little round circle where everybody's like, this is a bad feature. No, this is a good feature. And then, yeah, I don't know. This is an awkward question.
It's a very awkward
Do I need to stand in the middle? I
know. We'll start fighting. I've had like really good experiences and really like sometimes undesired experiences. But for the most part, what is it? Peter, he's my babysitter this week. But he said like a cool thing like earlier. He said the business will like sort them out, kind of thing. So I work with like a ton of great people now, developers. Like, so it was a surprise to me that designers and like are introverts. You know, most of designers are introverts because I'm not introverted. But it seems that like literally everyone in the tech field is introverted. You know, like especially developers. They're super awkward. You know, and like
What the?
And they're no, like it's just when it talks about like coming up to you, they're like, hey, Margaret. You know, and it's really cute. I'm like, hey, like just I'm like bother me all the time, please. You know, don't be afraid, kind of thing. But it's really sweet. So like,
You're the first girl they've seen in real life.
I know, right? It's intimidating. So
Why we need more
I can say that I'm a developer. I'm allowed to pick on.
so like working with them, just being like open and like starting the conversation, and you know, I am a big proprietor in like building a relationship through humor. So I feel like once I make them laugh, you know, we're like pretty good friends. Gosh, it depends. It's like person to person.
Yeah.
You know, it's not necessarily like as a developer.
I can tell you some, like
this.
one thing you shouldn't do as a dev is just like take your own course. For example, don't just put a feature in a product because you want it or think it's cool. I had somebody the other day that was like, it was just a delete and he had a quick undo at the bottom, and I was like, that's not part of what you're supposed to be doing. He's like, no, I only spent a half a day on it. I'm like, this not what you're supposed to be doing. Where's the rest of the feature?
Right.
Or they just changed the design and they're like, I thought this looked better.
Oh yeah.
There it is. That was the right answer. That's what you were asking right there. That's what it was. Actually, I just kind of said something, and it reminded me of a question that you and I got yesterday in the panel, and I thought now that this is being streamed and recorded, this might be a great position to bring this back up for both of you. So on these teams, you know, I made that joke about you're the first girl he's ever seen. Well, we have a lot of female developers now in our program, which is super exciting. But there was the concern yesterday that got brought up that is like, you know, I still feel like a young female student asked, I still feel like I'm surrounded by guys, you know, like, and what kind of advice can you give me to break into a field that has that stigma or that kind of current atmosphere? So what are some of maybe words of encouragement or advice or just shifts that you're seeing towards more balance in the workplace?
I was telling a story earlier. I was in Chicago for this like web summit, and we were at dinner, this really big table of people, and somebody across the table was like, Margaret, did you ever feel like you're alone? I was like, what? I didn't notice. It was like 20 guys. I'm literally the only girl in this like sea of 20 dudes. And like women in design, it's only like getting heavier, you know. I worked for a really small agency at one point. It was all women. There were no guys there. So I work for like a really big company that's like super progressive, and we're really big on just like hiring a ton of different people to interact with one another. We actually have a ton of women developers where we are, and we encourage women to come in and like take these positions, you know, and come and like hang out with us. I don't know if it's a little bit different for you.
Yeah. So that question always it's been the perpetual question.
Right.
Lately, anytime you go speak anywhere, question always comes up. And I've tried to formulate a good answer for it, but you know, basically from somebody who hires and builds a team, I'm going to hire the best person. it doesn't matter who you are. The only thing that might be interesting is like, some people have different like dietary things where they want a special snack in this break room, like whatever. But when it comes to girls, I mean, the thing about it is there's just not enough a lot of times, especially in Orlando. Like I remember the first time I met a female dev in Orlando, and I was like, we were going around the circle because they worked at a company downtown, and I knew some of them. They're like, marketer, designer, marketer. And this one girl's like, I'm a dev. And I was like, you're a dev? This is awesome. And she was like, what, because I'm a female? It's surprising? I'm like, no, it's just great. We don't have enough. And I really hate that. I mean, being a guy, it's different because maybe I don't see the stigma. I'd rather see the encouragement that a lot of people try to put forward into bringing more diversity into engineering in general. It's not even CS or tech. It just needs, people need to be more confident, willing to go into it, because the trend will shift, but it doesn't shift if you don't take an effort to change it.
Sure.
That just means as a girl you have to be a kick-ass developer, which I
right.
know you would be anyway,
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I don't think I got my job because I'm a girl. I got my job because I'm good at what I do.
Yeah, and just so everybody in here can hear it again, my answer to her yesterday was, go to graduation. If you said you're about to graduate. Have you been to a web graduation yet? No. The reason I say that is if you go to graduation, and I go to these things all the time, obviously, a disproportionate amount of, and this is a challenge to all the guys in here, actually, a disproportionate amount of advanced achievers and valedictorians are the women in the graduating classes. Like, they kick your asses every time.
Yeah, we do.
Every time. So I just trying to give words of encouragement, because I think sometimes it is kind of intimidating, and you look around the room here and just take a quick survey, and the women are vastly outnumbered, right?
Yeah.
But
if you want to really kind of get a lay of the land for female developers in Orlando, there's a meetup called Lady Devs. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Good. I try to suggest meetups.
Yeah.
I was going to do the same thing. Yeah.
I think in pretty much every panel that we've been in, the meetups get brought up, and that's definitely hands down the best way to get
your
out.
Networking is just, your soft skills and your network are just as valuable as your technical skill set.
Yeah. I think next time around, actually, he and I were talking, we're going to do a soft skills talk. So be on the lookout for that if you're hanging out when we do that. We have other question? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mark. I'm mobile development. So my question pertains to portfolios, and it's actually geared to both of you. From the development side, what do you expect to see in a portfolio, or what medium do you expect to see it in? Is it a code library on GitHub? Is it a private library? Is it a case study? Is it PDF bindings? And the same thing on the design side. Are you looking for case studies, or are you looking for just finished products, or the whole 9 yards?
Do you want to? So on my side, it's are you able to solve a problem? And that's not necessarily being we're this shift, right, where we're just looking at a bunch of dribble and being oh, he's so dope, that kind of thing. I do that still, but then I have to be okay, is he good at going from A to B? He or she are going from A to B. So it's there's this thing where people are doing now where it's basically showing the process of things. So it starts out with, here's what I started out with, maybe the Post-its of research, right? And here's maybe this thing. And then it'll be something next about architecture of something. And then after it's basically telling the story of where you started and where you finished. So that's really important, because then we can get a sense if you're good at critical thinking and problem solving and that whole thing. Having visual design chops is
yeah,
awesome.
having a bunch of logos on Dribbble, it's cool. It's great. Branding, and you can come up with cool icons and logos and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't really. You brand a product once, hopefully, maybe twice over a course of 20 years to update it, something like that. So yeah, I mean, the critical thinking aspect of it is something that I look for when I look at design stuff. It's funny you mentioned Post-it notes, because every UX person that I've ever hired, like, that's the first thing I give them is just a gigantic stack of Post-it notes. I'm like, go to the product and just go, like, draw up a bunch of stuff and see what you think. For dev, if you're not in the Orlando dev Slack, get in there, because you will see people talk about this all the time. For me, with portfolios, especially coming from a college, have something that's not part of your curriculum, number one, because we look at the same portfolios all the time. I can look at somebody and tell them by their resume format if they went to UCF, Full Sail, or a boot camp, and I can tell you by their GitHub the same thing, if you're not careful. And that doesn't stand you out. So really, it's have something interesting in your GitHub, whether it's an open source project that you're passionate about. Like, I don't have time to do open source. It's just really unfortunate. And I believe in being something other than a developer too. But have projects that aren't that. It doesn't even matter if it's, go build a weather app. There's free APIs out there, and make it glorious with animations and all this stuff. Like, anything. It doesn't have to be something that you're making money off of. Just something that you can put on your GitHub that's really beautiful, really well thought out code, clean, documented, comment. Like, do it like you would if you're working with 20 people. Don't make just one big commit. Show that you can use branches and history and all of that stuff. That's really one of the big things.
Was that also recorded? Okay, I'm just making sure that I have like talking points to extract from this for our classes. Yeah, and I think that's fantastic. One thing I heard you both say answer in your answers there was, it's the portfolio is only the first part. There's always going to be that second part where you have to sit down and show that the portfolio is actually, well, I don't want to say actually yours, but where it came from, right?
Oh, that's happened.
Well, I don't want to say that though.
Yeah, we also I've been in the experience recently where somebody's online presence was completely different from what we sat through. I was like, this is confusing, at this moment. Like, I was like, I thought she had her shit together, and then we were in here, and I was like, did we look at the wrong website at first? So that's slightly disappointing, but I mean, it's only small.
If you're going to take the time to do a website and you're going to use that as your portfolio, make sure everything on your website works.
Yeah.
Because you get in there and people are like, oh, here's my website, and then you realize that they didn't really spend the time doing it, and it just hurts your personal branding so bad.
And your links are broken.
Yeah.
Oh, the worst.
It's terrible.
It's not responsive.
I'm taking the time. I'm taking the time to research you. At least put an effort to make it worthwhile to go into, and make sure it's your stuff, because there's nothing we know. It's pretty obvious. I had one guy struggle with this algorithm question we gave him. Right, it's live coding, so I can see what he's typing as he's typing it. He comes up with one solution, not right. Comes up with another solution, not right. Starts going down another path, still not right. And then all of a sudden, he just erases the entire thing, and it's just magical how it all flowed directly as nothing was wrong. Obviously, he was copying it off of Google or somewhere. Somebody gave him a web page and the solution, and he's just typing what he's seeing, because we actually copy and pasted it and Googled that and found it. So, yeah.
Would you say that's smart or not?
Not
People ask me how we detect plagiarism all the time.
Google?
Yeah. That's kind of what Google does. It's a plagiarism.
Finds things.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and they have that image thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've done that. It's amazing what you can find on other people's dribbles from the people that are applying.
I honestly got a question. Has anybody ever handed in a code base that had a different person's name in the package?
Yes.
That's bold.
Full Sail, real world education. That's what we have. That's good. We have a question over here.
Hi, my name's Gary. I'm from Mobile. I had a question. You mentioned that you're hiring a lot of people. So what is the most common mistake you see from interviewees? And after they get a job, how could you, like, what advice would you give them to, like, overcome, like, imposter syndrome?
Ooh, we actually had a long, big discussion on Slack about this. Again, ODev Slack, about this 2 or 3 days ago. Imposter syndrome is kind of a fallacy in a lot of ways, I think, personally. Some people might disagree with me. You're always not going to know something. And nobody that you ever work with, like there's one guy at Highwinds who, he's been doing C++ for 25 years. And they were arguing the other day about which method was actually better. And he's like, in the documentation and all that stuff, like you're never not gonna have to look something up. So I don't necessarily, you're a junior, you're not supposed to know everything. Get in there, ask questions, learn, and hit the gas. You're gonna make mistakes. Your first code review is gonna be terrible, I promise you. It'll probably have 50 comments if there's that many lines of code. But it's okay, you're a junior. You're supposed to be there. The biggest mistake, the number one way to get me not to talk to you, I'm done with the interview, is if so my first phone screen, and if you ever interview with me, you'll know this, first 15 minutes, I ask you questions. Last 15 minutes, you ask me questions. Because you're interviewing the company as much as the company's interviewing you. You want to make sure you want to like the place you work at. Number one thing that I ask them, first question, every single time. So do you have any questions about Highwinds? And if the response is, well, can you tell me what you do? Nope. I took all this time to research you, to come up with questions based on your resume, your skill set, your code. Like I have questions about your projects, all this stuff. You should know something about my company. It doesn't even have to be specifically what app you're going to be working on or anything like that. Just know something about the company.
Anything like that for you guys on the Capital One design side? Like, is things that just you avoid going into an interview? Or ways to prepare for it?
I mean, we've had people interview for positions that didn't. I was like, why are they interviewing for this? It doesn't seem like they are fit, for this position. It was like, okay, so for instance, we have content strategists. We have a whole team of content strategy. So they're building out their team, and we needed one specifically for our team. So we were interviewing someone, and it was basically like, hey, so if you could pick a perfect job, what would that job be? What would that job look like to you if you could tailor your perfect experience? And they're like, so I really like being a print designer, and it was just like, oh, like what? Is it okay, cool. So it was a little bit off the mark in that regard. I don't know. I'm trying to think of other stuff.
Also, if you're a web person,
yeah,
everybody's been having problems with this UI, UX kind of realm. Make sure that the position that you're applying for is not some people are saying UI developer versus UI designer, and people are getting them mixed up. So if you're a dev type, don't apply to a designer type, or at least read the requirements.
Mm. Yeah.
And you said that applies also to the difference between UI and UX. Mm-hmm. Because same kind of line. You guys have a shared role with UI and UX?
Yeah, I'm a UI UXer.
Right, but I mean, at your company, that's just you're expected to know both sides. Because I know you pulled up 3 data sheets full of information that you had to make designs off of, and I think that falls firmly under the realm of UX. And then you turned around and put it into sketches, which is firmly in the role of UI, right? So I mean, I think that you're kind of crossing both those lines. Would you say your whole team is like that? You don't have specialists?
Absolutely. I think it's important to be like that, to be honest. Understanding how something works, and then architecting it, and then designing it is gosh, I would be so sad, if all I did was UI, which I love it, I love designing, but at the same time, it's important, I think, to be involved in the whole thing.
Okay, we are kind of wrapping up on time here, so just one more time, I'd like to thank both Austin and Margaret for joining us here on stage today. Can we give them a round of applause?
And thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for moderating.
Yeah, thanks.
I work here. That's thanks everybody for joining us both here on campus and online. I do believe this will be made available over the weeks to come, so stay tuned if you.
And thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you. So I think they'll hang around for a little bit here at the end if you guys have any questions you want to come up.